Lift and Love is a podcast rooted in faith, family, and the conviction that loving LGBTQ plus people is a calling to be embraced, not feared. Across episodes, hosts from the Lift and Love team and their guests address current topics, offer practical support, and share experiences related to LGBTQ plus issues in faith communities. Thanks for joining us on our mission to lift and love.
Today, we welcome Dr. Jennifer Finlayson-Fife, an LDS relationship and sexuality coach with a PhD in counseling psychology. She is the author of That We Might Have Joy, Desire, Divinity, and Intimate Love, and the creator of 6 online courses that help individuals and couples create happier lives and stronger intimate relationships. She also hosts Room for Two, a popular sex and intimacy podcast, and is a regular guest on LDS-themed podcasts discussing relationships, faith, and sexuality.
Jennifer, we're so excited to have you with us.
Yeah.
As it turns out, we still need help. We still
SOS. Yeah.
We need your help. We need more of your help. This is such a hard space for families, for parents particularly. This squeeze between their child and the gospel that they love and how they show up in this church. And by necessity, it changes. It's to be one of the real pain points because our kids are amazing and we adapt to that easier than we can. The changes that happen to us within the gospel and at church.
Yeah.
So we need your help. You always give such good advice. Yeah. So President Nelson has repeatedly warned us that spiritual autonomy is a critical part of spiritual survival. Let's talk about like a real tool set. What does this look like in practice when I'm a parent? So the first thing we wanted to ask you was, how can we build the muscle it takes when it pertains to support of LGBTQ children?
So I think, just to frame it, we so often think of this as something going wrong, like something kind of has gone askew, and now we don't know what to do, rather than to love is to run into the pressure point, the question of what does love ask of me in this relationship, right? And so to raise your kids and to care about them, whether they are LGBTQ, whether they have other struggles, the question of what does it mean to love this child? What does it ask of me? And that is hard because it's easy to maybe love a child that's just like you or that wants it. Most of us are pressured by that question. And I'm not in any way minimizing the way that having and loving an LGBTQ child as a faithful Latter-day Saint is a different level of challenge to that question, but it's still what I think the gospel is about. What Christ taught us is our work, our soul work. And so it's just maybe more punctuated. It's kind of more in our face, the question, than if we have a child with mental health problems or something like that. And or a child that just, I don't know, is making choices we don't feel great about or something. And so I think that it's the kind of, we grow up learning kind of what the rules of the road are, what the gospel asks of us, what are the commitments we make. But then there is the question of, what does it mean to love this person? What does it mean for who this soul is? And we often have the temptation to try to shove everybody back into the framework rather than utilizing the framework as a kind of starting point, but then to think, what does it mean to love this child? What does that ask? And to look for what the spirit of the law is, rather than perhaps what many of us wish for is the longing that the world would fit into the letter of the law. Wishing the world were simpler. And often meeting the fact that the world doesn't fit into the letter of the law with kind of anger and frustration, rather than it never was going to. And so the letter of the law kind of helps us build a framework, helps us build an inner compass, but then we have to use that compass to sort out what is the higher law here.
I think of, like, if we're thinking in tools, you mentioned a compass. I was talking to somebody yesterday about how we have to change what our measuring stick is. So maybe the prescribed letter of the law is like, this is the covenant path, and these are the milestones, and here's what you check off the list. And instead, we switch to the spirit of the law, which is a measuring stick of love. And that's that is everything is measured by love. And you would hope that the covenant, all these other things were teaching us more about relationship and love. And sometimes it doesn't quite connect the dots that way. And so switching over to this measuring stick of love, I feel, is permission giving for parents, because we're shifting what success is defined as.
Yeah, no,
and so we get that love measuring stick, and it feels so much more expansive.
Yeah. I think sometimes when we learn the standards of the gospel, or like how to be a successful person in society, with these ideas, and we imagine, if I just do all these things, I'm going to have a pain-free life. Everything's going to work out for me because I've lived by the rules. And soon enough, if we're paying attention, we realize, oh, that's not actually true. I can obey all the rules and still have a spouse who wants to leave the marriage, or have a child who's struggling with mental health, or something that challenges our feeling of control. And then kind of can meet that with anger that we don't have the control we want, rather than this helped to protect me to grow into a person more capable of sorting out what love actually is about. So yes, these things were valuable, but they weren't going to allow me to escape the soul work of loving another soul. And I think that sometimes why this gets difficult, I think to your point, Darice, is that we want more control than we actually have, and more control than love
always
is actually about. That is, we think, well, if I love my child, then they will go back to being the kind of person I think they should be. Or if I love them, they won't struggle in certain ways. And that's just not true. So much about loving them is caring about them, caring about what they're sorting through, valuing them as a person, even if they walk in the world differently than you do, and being invested in their well-being, but being clear about what isn't your job, what you don't have control over. Because I think, at least in my life, if I'm trying to control more than is mine to control, it interferes with love. It's more like, wait, you need to be something different, or you should feel this way or do this thing. And that is more about my ego than it is about love. And the questions of the ego and control and love are often in tension around these important relationships.
Yeah.
That's really, I think that is what we're talking about. And that is a real hard shift to move. My mom used to have a little piece of art in her room, and it said something. It was a woman, and she was floating in an upturned umbrella. And it said, sometimes I like to pretend, I hold on to the handle and pretend I'm in control. And other times I realize I'm just floating free. Yeah. And I can see that my mom doing that work of letting go of children that weren't doing what she had been raised to hope that her kids would do. And that little memory, that little reminder at her desk of, I'm not in control, and I might as well enjoy the ride of floating in this umbrella in the sky. Yeah. But anyway, I think of that a lot.
Last year at Gather, you spoke on the main stage, and I loved, you had mentioned the natural man, and you said, the natural man is when you serve the ego over what is true. And I think that, of course, that is our natural impulse, especially as women at a certain age, growing up in the church and being told, your kid's success and their celestial outcome is your responsibility. So we talk about control and ego, and it feels to me programmed in, and that is a scary thing to let go of. It's very, but then you get that into that tension as you have this LGBTQ kid, and you are trying to learn, what does it look like to have them thrive and flourish? And then you kind of that your integrity starts poking at you and saying, hey, some of this is maybe not what you know or believe to be true, and it feels out of alignment.
Yeah, 100%. So I think especially if your primary identity has been like being a full-time parent, a full-time mother, right? Your sense of self is kind of walking around on your kids.
Yeah.
Men can do this in another way, like they can have it be around their career success or how much money they make or whatever, but you can often control aspects of work that are very different than loving another human being in terms. So when your primary sort of self-measurement is what your kids' choices are, that can be quite devastating to your sense of self when you don't have other inputs on kind of who you are as a person. And so that pressure, I've certainly worked with non-LDS clients where either as the parent, they felt tremendous sort of measurement through what their children were doing or not doing, or adult clients who felt their parents pressuring them to go to certain universities and certain, professions because the parent was measuring themselves through the child's choices. So certainly we can be enculturated into that, but it's also just a very human instinct because we start out egocentric. It's where we all start. So spiritual work is growing outside of that. Like Christ said, when your right hand doesn't know what your left hand doeth, you're growing, or to lose yourself, to find yourself. It doesn't mean being a doormat and a martyr, but you're losing your ego to find what really matters, to find something much deeper and more rewarding, which is this through line of love. But when you're in the letting go process, it feels like I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to lose everything that matters to me. But this, Richard Rohr, he wrote the book Falling Upwards, and it talks about the spiritual pattern of fall. It feels like you're losing, but you actually find something much stronger in the loss, in the disillusionment, in things not going the way you expected. You actually find a richer soul. And, in these moments, I'm often saying things like, is there no other way?
For sure.
I want to be a better person. I don't want to suffer,
Right. That path of descent is a real kick in the butt.
And so, but you do often find deeper compassion inside yourself, more compassion for others, more wisdom about what really matters in life. I mean, and we often find something so much more solid inside of ourselves. And some of the strongest people I know have gone through really hard things, they themselves or in their families, and they found a deeper compassion and soulfulness that makes it easier to be with them, makes it, you feel you can be your whole human self with them because they know something about what it really means to be a human being.
I so believe that there's wisdom in suffering.
Yes.
I mean, Mike Petro and Faith Matters podcast about Job was just so good about the suffering of Job. I've never you use the scripture, you lose yourself to find yourself, and I've never put it in this space, and it fits perfectly. It really does.
I think
I'm so glad you brought that up.
There's so much wisdom in studying the paradox of scripture. Like I'm doing the Living School, Richard Rohr's Living School with Mike Petro as one of and I've just been studying the section on paradox, and there's just so much of, losing to find, and, those who are the poorest will inherit. And I think that's Christ taught in paradox. And I think as parents and loved ones of LGBTQ people, there is so much paradox. And you feel that tension, but that's where the teaching happens, right? I mean, the contrast, it just penetrates. And so I actually have been appreciating this study of paradox and how it definitely feels
so true,
applicable.
Well, we want so much a world that's like orderly and linear, and we keep trying to make the world be that, and it isn't that. And so
it isn't.
The paradox. It's really.
But leaning into it is where the wisdom is. That's I think that's where those people who have really suffered or really been through tragedies, there's just wisdom. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about ourselves. What if your beliefs and ideas are different than your child's? How do we provide safety for them and hold on to our own beliefs? Most LGBTQ children are not finding it easy to stay in the gospel, in the church. So these kids doing something else, and you've just gotten to be okay with their identity and the changes that are happening with them. And now you've got like really different kinds of you're on different paths now. How do you keep that? How do you, as a parent,
Oh,
keep
it's so
that?
hard, I think. And I think it's as a challenge that we have societally as well, because of course there's always been generational differences. Those that young people kind of roll their eyes like mom and dad don't get it and so on. But I think it's even more punctuated because of the way that we consume information. And so people can get really into kind of limited worldviews, and then they really just are scratching their heads about each other. And so what I think is, when you're saying safety, but also how do you stay in real conversation, I think the safety comes, the basic idea is that I love you and I trust you. I trust you to sort out your way. My mom and I had differences in how we thought about things at church at times. And I remember sharing with her some of my struggle and disillusionment, and even saying to her, I don't want to disappoint you, Mom. I don't want to make you worry about me because, I love you and I don't want that. And I remember my mom just saying to me, Jennifer, she's like, I trust you. I trust your goodness. I trust your ability to sort out in your relationship with God what is good for you. And she's like, I've got my own stuff to work out. I don't need to worry about you. So,
No, I love that.
Yeah, it's
I
such
think
a
the
gift.
trust part is a huge part that I hadn't thought about. I guess I tried to model it, but the I love you part wasn't hard for me. When my kid came out as trans, it was like, I love you. Thank you for telling me. But then when it comes to the I trust you part, I'm like, I do trust you. I'm not questioning, but like, let's learn together and let's do this together. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I had differentiated, like my identity wasn't my religion. It's very much a part of who I am and what I believe, but it didn't threaten my sense of self to have my kid pick something different. And if I hadn't been in that space, it would have been much more challenging for me to lead with love. It would have led with fear.
Well, what I loved about my mom's, go ahead.
I love this because you're building on the beginning, which is I love you. And then when it gets panicky, you move into this trust that your mom's talking about.
Yeah, and I think it was genuine. She wasn't like, I'm supposed to say, I trust you.
I trust you.
Please make the right choice. I think she really did. I mean, there was a humility in her position, which I really appreciated about my mom. She had the ability to see goodness in people of all different walks of life. She really saw it. So she really did lead with the idea of you have the light of Christ in you, like I have it in me. And there's no reason why I should think that I get it more than you, or that you don't deserve your own process to sort out what divinity is calling for in you. And so I think that she genuinely saw that, that was really helpful, but it also made me much more receptive to, why didn't this bother my mom, the thing that bothered me? Why did it not feel like a problem to her and things like that? Because she was open to me, it made it much easier to be open to her. And so that's the other thing I would say
100%.
is that I've learned a lot from people who see the world differently than I do by being in genuine conversation. Right. So for my mom to say, like, this is why this has meant a lot to me, this is what it's meant for me, it made a lot of sense to me. I see why I can see why that means something to you. I can see, given who you are, your history, why that has been a source of comfort for you that it hasn't been for me. But she could also understand why it wasn't for me, why it was a source of strain and friction. And I think for her to just say, I get that. So I think we both held more complexity in our view by having been in conversation than we would be if we were just judging each other as simple-minded or wrong-minded and just going on our way and finding other people who think just like us. And
I was thinking about that as you were talking. We are hopefully coming out of this place where we dabbled in, I'm just going to cut you off out of my life. And so many people have done that, like politically. And I think we dabbled in it, and I think it was a failed experiment. And certainly I had there were times and are still times where I'm like, I cannot deal with your beliefs.
Right. I want to cut
But
you off. Yeah.
I would like to cut. I would like to never hear from
You
you again.
deserve to be cut off.
Yeah, because we all lived through the period where parents were pushing their children out, their queer children out of their LGBTQ kids. And then when Lift and Love really got going and I was talking with moms during our support meetings, like the moms would say that the children had cut them off, which I fully understand, especially when they're not getting any kind of support back from their parents.
Yeah.
But even with parents who are really trying, I just saw that as so sad. Let I dig in deeper. And I love this.
Yeah.
And if the child can say, I trust you to learn my name, my pronouns, who I am, to understand what's coming from me. And the parent can say, I trust you to make your way just like I have. Like, then we're back in communication again, even though we don't agree always.
Yeah. Would you say that's one of the, like, if we're talking about tools, like, I feel to me, what I'm hearing is, as a parent, educating yourself and learning is a great way of saying, I trust you. And then you are equipped, you have the more tools. I remember when my oldest was first on this path of like having a trans kid, and she's like, here's this booklet you can read, from PFLAG, or here's this, and just educating myself felt like an act of love and trust. Like, I trust that this is this path that I am on to learn how to be the best parent you need me to be. And I think it's not just a passive, like, well, my kid's gay now, so I guess that's that, but learning what that means and then how you can support them.
Yeah.
It helps me feel empowered because I have the info,
Absolutely. So I think if I were to kind of try and nail down tools, just to be concrete, I think in some ways, it's learning what is your job and what isn't your job. My job is to know and be invested in my child's well-being. My job is not to get them to be like me, not to get them to believe like me, right? It's to know them, care about them, and be invested in them. And so that's not easy. I'm not saying those are easy things, but at least it's getting clear about, because when we're trying to change their view, there's often something about ourselves that we're trying to get worked out. If we're trying to get them be like us, and we may even think you would be happier if you were more like me.
Obviously.
It's not even that we're necessarily wrong about that idea. We may see a child who's struggling with something and you think if you could figure that out, you would be a lot happier. But the thing is, if I'm trying to make it my job to get you to do that, I'm actually stepping over the line and interfering with you growing into the expression of divinity that you can be. My job is to know you, care about you, understand you, learn from you, and share who I honestly am. And I know that sounds like, isn't that kind of the same thing? It's different. It doesn't have an agenda in it. Get something. I'm here to know you and be known to you, to love you and to let you know who I am. And that is an organically, it's really what my mom was saying is, I love you. I know you have a work to do in your own relationship with God that's not mine. It's not my job. And the clarity about that and the freedom in that actually made her more influential to me, because I could trust her more deeply, that she wasn't trying to morph me into her image. So then I wanted to understand better and respect more her approach to faith, her approach to a certain principle. And so I think that there's this strange, like, you actually increase your impact when you get clear about what is your job and what isn't.
Oh no, it's good. I love this idea of this trust and how helpful the differentiation, not being wrapped up with, that's a great tool that I can grasp onto. So good.
I talked to a mom last night, brand new. Her son's coming out of a heterosexual marriage. He's gay, and he is talking about dating, and it's new. Marriage is just, I told her kind of what to look for with this son who has been married, has children, and has never been with a man or dated men. And I gave her an honest view of what that looks like, because he's starting again to date men, right? But I had a real talk with her, and it was like a trusting, like, understand that this is what's going to happen with your son. And if you can talk to him about this in ways like, I understand that this is what's going to happen with you. And, I want to be here for you. It was just so freeing for her.
Yeah.
To being scared to like, because oftentimes the scary thing is the thing we don't know yet.
Yeah.
And when we know and we can just say, oh, okay, that might not be what we wanted, but it's the deal. And here we move forward. It was the same kind of concept of like, she can go to him trusting that he will go through this new experience and not all of it's going to be pretty, but that figure it out.
Well, I love that love and trust for kids. So here's the next question.
This one's
when you're in a mixed affirmation relationship, or mixed affirming, when your beliefs or actions are different from your spouse, particularly pertaining to how you were affirming your child. And I see this a lot, and forgive the oversimplification or at least the stereotype, but often in this space, we see the moms dive all in. We've got mama dragons and mama bears. And I know we have dad groups too, but typically the moms are like, they're coming out with claws ready to defend their kid, and the dad's kind of hanging back and check out, see how the pieces fold.
The dad lag.
Yes.
And oftentimes it gets to be really contentious between the parents, because here you're protecting a child and you feel like the husband becomes, and it is often the husband, and it is often the stereotype, but the husband becomes the aggregating, the aggressive factor.
Right.
So how do you work with this?
Okay. So it's so much of. So this there's also a dad lag often with special needs children. Okay. So
really?
I'm not trying to diss men at all. Okay. Because it's not always the case. Right? But I think that, I do think, again, I'm speaking very stereotypically, but I do think women, generally speaking, are more wired to map the needs and feelings of people around them. That's what keeps babies alive. That they're tracking, I think she's hungry. I think, he needs a nap. And dads are like, what? I don't, because they're more linear and focused. Okay. Right. And not even because they don't care, because they're just not tracking the same data often, because I think women are more wired for mapping and compassion. And that's why a lot of women can feel very controlled by what other people want from them, because they're taking in all that information, where men are not as attuned to it. And I just think it's how our brains are wired differently, plus how we're socialized. So very often when a mother has a child, an LGBTQ child, she is often more primed to understand and have compassion for the vulnerability of that child. She knows about their vulnerability. She has mapped it and tracked it and protected it, and now sees, oh my gosh, my child may be an adolescent, but I see them as now being vulnerable in a different way, than I thought, or than my other adolescent kids are. And so that protective instinct, there can often be primed for it and ready to kind of go in, and arguably even at times be overly protective and overly guarded, in a way that can keep the child from maybe growing some of their own self-confidence. So they can sometimes overprotect. Then fathers who, I think often in traditional realities, but also given that it's often men's strength, are often more the kind of the law. Like, this is what is expected. This is how we do things in this family. Often people, when you look at the research on parenting, the kids who thrive most have both in their families. They have expectations that are high and highly responsive parents. And so they're high on both fronts. So men have often represented more expectation. I know I'm speaking ridiculously stereotypically here. And women have often been high on responsiveness. But what happens is when there's some new challenge, often couples pull into their respective positions and they get entrenched in ways that even they don't feel good about. The parent who represents mercy is kind of overdoing it. The parent that represents justice is overdoing it. And yet then they kind of use their anger at the other person's position to kind of get more entrenched. And so what couples have to do, which is really, it's very intuitive, to go and create a collusive alliance. Okay, like let's say you have an LGBTQ child and you're the high compassion one, and you're just kind of like in this protective thing. Well, it's often going to drive more anger on this part of the parent that's less affirming because they feel excluded. They feel like the other parent's
Interesting.
coddling. And so it can drive more like, is this even real?
Kind of making this happen.
And so what is hard to do, but very important to do, is to recognize if I'm going to really stand up for my child, he or she needs us to have more of a united front as parents. No, the child's not going to say that, but that's true. Kids do better when their parents are in conversation with each other, not managing their differences through their kids. And so even though it's hard to do, it means going to your other parent and saying, why don't you affirm? Or why are you so coddling and protective? And it's not about why, you loser. It's like, again, back to that same thing of, I only have part of the puzzle here. I only have part of the perspective. Why do you see it differently? And I want to use your view to get my view cleaned up a little bit and vice versa. So it's using conflict and difference to be in honest enough conversation to expand your view. I mean, honestly, even though I hate these kinds of conversations because they're invalidating and they stretch your view of things and they're uncomfortable, at least for me. If I look back on my life, I always think it's always those conversations where I talked to somebody who really thought differently than I did, who really had a view. It's very often those conversations that grew me up a little bit, that helped me see more complexity in myself, in the world, in how I approach something. And so even though they always are uncomfortable for me, they always are very rich. They really make my life better. They make me a smarter person. But it means going into invalidation to do it. And so we tend to not do it well.
Hard. Yeah.
So hard to do.
That's where I stop.
Well, and when you're talking about your child's vulnerability, you feel like that is at risk.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then
You're gonna
really,
Yes.
you're going to really,
But you're going to make them
get
more
behind that wall.
vulnerable. If
Yes,
you,
agreed.
let's say you're coddling and you're driving their father's or their other parents' anger, you're making it worse for the child. So if you are like, I'm standing up for them, I'm going to go deal directly with this difference.
That's so good to look at it that way. We are
Yeah.
making it worse. And I did it to my husband early on. Like, don't you dare do this to my son.
Yeah. Yeah.
After a while, I was like, okay, that's kind
And I think that we also, like, my husband has never hesitated affirming our queer kids. He's amazing about it, but he goes about it differently. Like, I'm like, I've got a collapsible pitchfork in my purse in case I need to march. You know, I am ready. And he's more like, I'm just not going to say anything. I'm like, how can you not? I've got a pitchfork. You know, like, and so his approach, it's like, you know, a hammer and an anvil, and I'm ready to pound, and he just will absorb it. And so there's a different dynamic there. And sometimes I project and suggest, oh, he's not loving this enough, or he's not standing up enough. And it's just, I have to give room for, we have different ways to go about it.
Yeah. 100%.
Dang it.
I know. And that's just marriage, you know.
It is. But I really like that. That's something you can hold on to, that tool of like, I'm making it worse for this child.
Yeah.
Like, that's something you can hold on to and really check yourself against. Like, yes, because otherwise you're like, well, I'm right. I'm the one that's protecting everything you're doing, you know. But if you're like, this isn't, first of all, our children need to learn who are vulnerable, whether it be special needs or LGBTQ, they have to learn how to face
navigate
that in the real world.
They do. Absolutely. That's right. Exactly. And sometimes in our coddling, we are actually undermining their self-confidence. I have a special child, and one of the things he's said to me at times is, you haven't expected enough of me, you know. And I think he's right. But, you know, of course I was like, oh, I don't want him to be vulnerable. I don't want him to get teased. I don't want these things. And I get the impulse, but that's different than what does this child need to thrive in the world. And it might mean allowing them to test the limits of their capacity and figure their way through. And that protective instinct was more about managing my fear than, I mean, I think we can forgive ourselves for, you know, we don't get an instruction manual. We're just working our way through, of course.
And we're
But I
fighting our
think if I,
body's chemistry of like spiking
oh
and all of
yeah,
it. Yeah,
Yes.
we're fighting all that.
yeah, it's just breathing it down sometimes. But
Yeah.
I think sometimes we think our in what's loving is to protect people from pain, and
Mhm.
we certainly want to protect them from abuse. But
Yes.
sometimes pain is the greatest teacher. Sometimes disillusionment, invalidation, coming up against our limitations is where we go and look for something deeper in ourselves.
Yeah.
And, when my parents had 8 kids, they didn't even have time to hover.
We didn't even know if anyone was in the car. You're like 15 passenger
You're like,
van. I'm not even going to count off.
exactly. And when you have 3 kids, like I do, it's much easier to hover and overprotect.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not sure we have a more anxious generation than we've ever had because I think we are sometimes overly protective, but it's often serving something in us more than for the child. And so,
So good.
Yeah, I
So
know.
good.
I know helping my kid navigate when she first came out as trans and hadn't really socially transitioned much. And I remember her getting very upset at me because we were in Florida, which, isn't really a trans friendly place. And she wanted to use the girls' bathroom. And I was like, I don't think this is safe for you. And so I think there's a monitoring of where is this coming from? I'm trying to educate, help her understand the bigger picture, how someone else might perceive this. Like, I know where you are on your journey and I honor that. This guy who sees you going into this bathroom after his 5-year-old girl probably isn't going to interpret it the same way.
yeah.
And so, there's certainly like all the wisdom that you shared with the balance of teaching them.
Yeah.
This isn't me out of
100%.
fear. It's me trying to help you be equipped to navigate with a bigger picture. And that's always a lot then we get to second guess ourselves about where's this coming from?
Yeah, no,
Well,
I know.
and so we've made peace with all of the things within our family and our spouse, and what we believe and our support of our children is not supported by the members of the church when we say, we feel like we need to say something in a class. And even when a bishop comes against our support of a child or a stake president when you're doing a recommend or whatever.
Yeah.
But parents need to be able to move into that space of this is our life and this is how it is now. We need to be okay at church. So what do you suggest there to work with them, which makes it hard?
100%. So I think I have maybe 2 thoughts about it. So the first one, okay.
All of the thoughts.
See if I can keep remembering them. But the first one is that again, just normalizing the tension that you're in, that nothing's going. You're in a system that wants that is designed for order, designed for structure, and you are a variation on that structure. And so there is an inherent tension, and the more you can just understand that nothing's going wrong, even though it feels hard. Okay. The fact that you're in conflict, nothing's going wrong. You've brought 2 people together that are different and you're trying to work out a life. And the fact that you're in conflict is 100% normal. Okay.
Yeah.
What you do in that conflict is really the measure. How you handle that. Do you handle it with hatred and self-righteousness, or do you handle it with love? And so I think the second idea is, and this is something I remember, I listened to a Malcolm Gladwell podcast years ago where he was interviewing a priest of why can't I say the name of the religious group? Not the Amish, but the kind of
Mennonites
group. And he had a gay son and he loved his son. And he was a pastor in the Mennonite church. And so he was in that tension. And he was really in that question of what does love ask of me? And he decided for him that it was to marry his son and to use his ability as a pastor to marry his son. But he ended up losing his ability to be a pastor for the church because they turned against him for doing it. But he still made this really meaningful impact through his integrity and through his decision to love his child. And he said, you can't change the body. You can't hate the body you're trying to change. You have to love it
Wow.
And so just that love is still there for us. And so even though you may disagree, even though you may see limitation, can I still meet this with love and investment and caring about all of these people, even those who see the world differently than I do? And I think that's the Christian way. I think that's what Christianity asks of us. Christ never said it was going to be easy, but it's really, and it's never just going to work out and just be perfect. We're often living in the messiness of those questions. But I think our desire to love, our desire to do what we believe is good, that is worth a tremendous amount. And when people feel that you're not being led by, I think one of the reasons Carolyn Pearson was such a force is you felt her love. Even if she saw the world differently than you did, she wasn't trying to tear anything down. She loved her Latter-day Saint people, and she believed in us. And so you could feel that, which really increased her influence and her impact, ability to listen to her, even people who thought very differently than she did.
And she actually seemed to be in lockstep with her local leaders. They supported her most of the time.
Yeah,
She brought them along.
She was a force. Exactly.
Yeah, because she brought them along. She loved them. And I think that's what kept her tethered, was the love she felt from her local community.
Yes, I think that's very true. And I think she also loved. But I think there's when people feel like, okay, I may think you're whacked in the way you think, but I can tell you're not trying to destroy anything. Okay.
Yeah.
At least that allows you to feel like you're there. I think sometimes when we lead, and so here's my third idea, is whatever we're sharing, we want to watch that we're not sharing it from a place of, I'm up here on the mountaintop, here to tell the rest of you how it really is. Trying to stay in the humility. And by humility, I don't mean one down. Like, this is my honest experience. This is my honest perspective. This is why I think it matters so much to support our kids or to support one another in whatever differences we are in. This is what I think my commitment to Christ asks of me. But if it's about me and my honest experience, it makes it easier for people to actually learn through your story, through your honest view, through the humility of your perspective that you're sharing truthfully. They can still be like, well, I just don't see it that way. And they don't have to see it that way. But it's also harder to kind of just shake it and dismiss it. Now, if you come in like, look, all of you need to repent, and these are the, people are more likely to just dismiss you as a know-it-all and, one up, they can just kind of write you off and kind of hate you back. So I think there's something about just the intimacy of sharing our own experience. And, I know in my own congregation, I often lead with, like, for me, this hasn't made sense because of blah, blah, blah. For me, I'm not able to accept this idea because I feel like it means this, blah, blah, blah. I know some people may see it differently, but for me, that's not worked, and they might still be like, well, if she had more faith, it would, but that's fine. But at least they don't feel like I have a destructive.
I love that. I love that. And we could put that to every one of these questions. You can't hate the body you can't hate the person you're trying to change, or the body, or the institution, or the classroom.
Yeah. Exactly.
That is just so, that went right into my bones, that piece. Yeah. And the idea that, like, the Mennonite pastor, like, sometimes a bishop will pull your recommend if they think that your support of your child is, against one of the questions, which I don't personally understand, but it's only for a time as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Bishops,
and if you think of
wisen up, people change, we change bishops, and this is a long process we're going through.
And I like when I think about this, when our support of our kids don't align with leaders, we have the greater stewardship. And so that doesn't give us authority to, like you said, Jennifer, like, come at it from this angle. Right. But these leaders will only be leaders for a time, and we are parents forever. And it's important to know who we're defending, who we're protecting. And oftentimes when we don't have understanding leaders, they're also protecting. They feel that they are protecting the institution. So we're both being protectors in this situation. And I think I have more skin in the game. They might feel the same way. And so it's really hard. But
I have to be true to my stewardship. That might put us at cross purposes, but I still have to be true to my conscience and my stewardship.
Right.
And I've often said to myself, I have to take this up with God. So like, even if I'm wrong, like I trust if this is like from a place of more purity of heart, even if others disagree, I'm not even saying I'm right. This is what I feel is right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And coming from a place of integrity, not conformity, which is what is often so much easier for leaders when you just conform. And when you don't, like you said, this is a system based on structure and order, and we are the variation. And so, when we are the variation, we become the problem, and it's not convenient.
Oh, it's not.
Well, thank you so much for helping us through this conflict. Like, it's a hard space, but I hear it every day. Like, I wouldn't change it. I've grown so much. My connection to the Savior is better. My child is thriving. These are the steps that this is the quest, right? The journey that we have to go through. And it's not fun, but there's growth in it. And in the end, you come up with just a better you, a better child, a better you, and a better understanding of God and a better connection.
Yes.
And
so true.
I guess doing all that isn't easy, as it turns out. You're always so good to meet with us. And I get comments all the time about how much you help. And you've given me a lot to think about. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us. If you like what we share, subscribe to the Lift and Love podcast. And if you have a minute, leave us a 5-star rating so other families like yours can find us. If you feel like you need more information, support, or resources, check out liftandlove.org and liftandlove.org on Instagram and Facebook. But most importantly, remember, you are not alone in this journey. We are building a community of thriving, faithful LGBTQ individuals and their families who are here to lift and love you.
If you're an LGBTQ Latter-day Saint or love someone who is, we'd love for you to join us at the 4th Annual Gather Conference this November in Provo, Utah. Registration is open now at liftandlove.org.